Have you ever wondered what happens when a court raises a question out of the blue? A question that was never included in the case by either party and is doing so legally sound. Hello, I am your lawyer friend, Advocate Rahul Lakhera. Today, we will talk about a very important Supreme Court decision that has clearly instructed high courts on what rules they must follow when framing an additional question of law in second appeals. Today, you will learn what Section 100 CPC Code of Civil Procedure is, what a second appeal is, and how it differs from a first appeal, where the High Court gets the power to raise an additional legal question, what principles the Supreme Court has set for High Courts, and most importantly, why and when an additional substantial question of law can be raised. This will help you to understand how meticulous and rule bound the judicial process is. Also, if your civil case is ongoing, you will learn what rules the court must follow. So let's start. The story of the case. This is the story of the case CP Francis versus CP Joseph and others. What was the case about? This case was about a property dispute between two brothers. There was a joint will dated January 27, 2003. According to this will, CP Francis, the appellant, was to get ownership of two family properties. However, there was a condition. And what was the condition? The condition was that Francis had to pay sums between 50,000 and 1 lakh to his sixth sibling within 5 years of both parents' death. The matter went to court. The trial court upheld the will's validity and ruled in favor of Francis. The first appellate court also affirmed the trial court's decision and upheld the validity of the will. But the story took a twist when the matter reached the Kerala High Court. The High Court overturned the decisions of both lower courts. It reasoned that the bequest was void under Section 67 of the Indian Succession Act. Now, you might be thinking, what's wrong with that? If a law applies, the court applied it. What's the problem? The problem was that the issue of Section 67 of the Indian Succession Act was never raised in the pleading, nor was it discussed during the trial court proceedings. The intricacies of the law. To understand this case, we need to understand two important legal terms. First one, second appeal. Under Section 100 of CPC, Code of Civil Procedure 1908, a second appeal is filed in a high court when a case involves a substantial question of law. And what is a second appeal? In a civil case, the trial first takes place in a lower court like a district court. The first appeal against its decision is made to higher court like a district judge. If a party is still not satisfied and the matter is related to a substantial question of law, they can file a second appeal in the high court. Now, what is substantial question of law? This means a legal question that is not merely about a party's personal mistake but is related to the interpretation of the entire law. This question must be so important that its answer could change the outcome of the case. It is not a trivial question. Additional question of law. The proviso to Section 100, subsection 5, CPC grants the High Court the power to raise an additional substantial question of law if it believes the case involves one, even if it was not raised before. But this power does not give the High Court the license to act arbitrarily. The Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court, in overturning the High Court decision, said that the High Court had made a big mistake. Now let's understand key observations by the Supreme Court. Point number 1. It is mandatory for the High Court to record reasons when framing an additional substantial question of law. Point number 2. This power is not to be exercised routinely but only in exceptional circumstances. Point number 3. The Supreme Court, in setting aside the High Court's decision, said that the High Court framed a new question and gave a verdict on it without any pleadings from the parties and without any reason. It seems as if the High Court started a brand new chapter without asking anyone, and that's true. After all, the question and answer were already done in the old book. It's like solving a question in an exam that was not even in the syllabus. Now, understand important principles laid down by the Supreme Court in this case. The Supreme Court laid down 6 principles that High Court must follow. The new legal question must be grounded in the parties' pleading and the findings of the lower courts. It must be so fundamental that it goes to the very root of the matter. Exceptional jurisdiction. This is an exceptional jurisdiction and should not be exercised routinely. There must be a strong and convincing reason to do so. Prior questioning is necessary. This power can only be used if at least one substantial question of law has already been framed when the second appeal was admitted. The question must be substantial. The High Court must be satisfied that the new question is a truly substantial question of law, not just a legal plea. Recording of reasons is mandatory. The High Court is mandatorily required to record its reasons for framing an additional substantial question of law. Opportunity to the other party, the opposite party, the respondent, must be given a fair and proper opportunity to contest the new question. Framing a question while dictating the judgment without hearing the parties would be improper. In this case, C.P. Francis got relief from the Supreme Court because the Kerala High Court did not follow the legal procedure. The High Court raised a legal question that was neither in the pleading nor discussed in the lower courts. The High Court did not record any reason for framing the additional substantial question of law under Section 105 CPC. The High Court did not give the opposite party any opportunity to present their argument on this new question. Thus, the High Court violated the procedural rules, which is why the Supreme Court overturned its decision. What can you learn? This decision teaches us that in court, truth and evidence alone are not enough. Following legal procedure is just as important. If you follow all the rules in your case, even if the lower court's decision is against you, you have a chance to get relief in the higher court. So friends, today we saw how the Supreme Court has drawn a line for the high courts. This decision has made it clear that every step in the judicial process should be taken thoughtfully and within the framework of the rules. I hope you found this information useful. If you have any question, feel free to ask in the comments. See you in the next video. Jai Hind.